Sarah, thanks for agreeing to do this. It's above and beyond, I think.
Absolutely. Again, I'd say you're welcome, but we'll see how it ends first.
We'll see how it goes. Did you get the article I emailed to you last night from Bloomberg News? The headline, I believe the headline was, "Has Donald Trump eaten the old Mike Huckabee whole?" And had a quote from Skip Rutherford in Little Rock that people in Little Rock figure that Huckabee just seems to be trying to out-Trump Trump. I got a kick out of that article. Did you get a kick out of it?
There were parts of it that I got a kick out of, probably not nearly as much as you did, but
what did you think of it?
We come at things from a pretty different angle. So,
but the point of it leads me to a more serious question. I think the Trump candidacy, this boomlet or this mania going on right now, really impairs your dad more than any other candidate. I think that the idea of an outsider, anti-Washington, anti-establishment, trained in media, a bit of a celebrity, appealing to the disaffected, anti-Washington people, that's your dad's deal. And Trump is kind of messing him up right now, isn't he?
I don't think so. I think Trump is a very different type of candidate. I mean, my dad's got a very long list of other qualifications. He was a governor for 10.5 years, as you know. He's been an executive, a leader. He's been in an elected position. He's actually run a campaign. I think he and Trump are incredibly different people. I think obviously there are some parallels that you can draw, absolutely. But I think you could do that with any of the 16 candidates on the stage. You pick 2 of them, I'm sure you can find commonality between all of them. You don't just go out and run for president if you don't have a few things that are probably similar to some of the other guys running. So I certainly don't think that he's taking anything away from my dad or our campaign, and we're not letting his campaign affect ours. And we haven't since we started running, whether it was Trump in first or Jeb Bush polling at the top or Scott Walker. We've been focused on our campaign and we'll continue to do that.
So Trump is polling, forgive me for talking about polls, but we talk about polls, 20-ish, and within states, nationally, he's leading. And I'm asking the same question a different way, so forgive me for that. But if he weren't there, some of that 20% would be on with your dad, don't you think?
Absolutely.
That he'd at least get his share of that.
Absolutely. I think some of that would be with my dad. Some of it would be with, again, several of the other 15 candidates. Some of the guys that you see at 1% and 2%, I think would probably be at 3% and 4% and maybe even 5%. So I think he's taking a little bit from everybody, but I think a big part of that doesn't have as much to do with what Trump is saying, but frankly what guys like you are saying. You are giving him all the air in the balloon that he needs. Because
I'm here to talk about Huckabee, and my questions are about Trump.
Exactly.
That's just the way it goes.
I mean, that's just kind of the nature of the business, and right now the questions are focused on Trump. The media is focused on Trump. And I think, again, we'll see a transition from that. It's a long process. We have a lot of, at least 6 months to go before the first vote is ever cast. I think we're going to see a lot of fluctuation just like we have over the previous 6 months. And I just hope and think that our peak time will be at the right time and on February 1st when we're moving into the first ballots.
So not about Trump, but in the context of Trump. This week, Governor Huckabee managed to get noticed amid all the Trump mania. Highly critically in some areas, but in others perhaps not, with his comment that the Iranian nuclear proposed agreement, as he put it in his metaphorical style, is leading Israel to the door of the oven. Barack Obama got asked about that in Africa. Chastised Governor Huckabee by name, responded to him directly. I don't mean to be cynical, and that's an important issue when you're talking.
That's hard for you, though, right?
But that was actually, that's kind of golden, isn't it, in this climate right now, to get the President of the United States to respond to what it's actually.
Absolutely.
It helped.
If Barack Obama is saying you're doing something wrong, then you're probably doing something right, particularly for a Republican presidential candidate.
So this falderall this week about Governor Huckabee's statement, or the great discussion of it, is actually helpful in the climate of 16 candidates trying to get noticed, with one of them getting all the media's attention. There is a political upside to that kind of attention at this point, isn't there?
Right, especially I think if it's positive attention and you're talking about a message that needs to be, and an issue that needs to be addressed, which I think in this case my dad certainly was. The feedback that we've received has been overwhelmingly positive. And again, it's a serious issue that somebody needs to be talking about. And, you know, if it's us, then I think that's a good week for us on the campaign.
I've just got to ask then, do you, as his campaign manager and his loving daughter, do you ever wince at some of his metaphors or hyperboles?
Usually when they're directed to me, not having to do with the
He
campaign.
talks about you in metaphors and hyperboles as well.
On occasion, I mean, you know.
But that, you're not going to tell me that was a calculated thing, the door of the oven.
I mean,
right?
he
Was
made
that a
the-
practice line, or I take it as his?
Johnny made the comment on a Saturday afternoon satellite radio show. If he was really trying to go out and, you know, get huge attention, don't you think he would have done that on one of the 20 different major networks that he was on over the last 2 weeks versus a Saturday afternoon satellite radio show?
You're being a little disingenuous. In the current environment, anything you say anywhere is out there, right?
I don't disagree with that, but I mean, the idea that he said it in
That's
the
what you're
hopes
saying.
of generating a ton of attention, I think, you know, the timing, I think, speaks for itself in terms of this was a calculated move. I think it's an issue he's extremely passionate about, and one that he's probably more versed on and more passionate about than just about any other. And, you know, I don't know that it's joking, but sometimes in our family, we kind of joke that a lot of people take family vacations and their first big trips are to places like Disney World and Six Flags. We went to Israel. I went on my first trip to Israel at the age of 11. I went through Yad Vashem. It was something that was extremely important to him to expose each of us to at a very early age so that we understood what happened when nobody stood up and did anything. And so this isn't a new issue for him. It's not something that you know, he feels uncomfortable talking about or did for media attention. It's just something he's passionate about. And I think it's something you're going to continue to hear him talk about.
You're going to continue to hear that metaphor, the door of the oven?
You know, that's a question you'd have to ask him, but it's one that he's certainly not going to back down from because of the seriousness of the issue. And we've had an overwhelming amount of support come from within the Jewish community and from major Jewish organizations that absolutely agree and back him up. I mean, if you look at Netanyahu himself has used that same type of language and metaphors in his own speeches over the last several years.
All right, one more Trump thing that you
You
want-
just can't help
you want-
yourself,
I
can
got
you?
two that'll be not based in it. But is he going to fade?
You know, that's a question, you know, I guess somebody like yourself that sits around and analyzes those things could probably answer just as well. But
You don't sit around and analyze this stuff. I think you do that for a living.
I do.
What do you think?
You know, obviously I've got my sights set on another candidate and expect his star to rise more than I'm focused on Trump's fading. And so that's where we're going to continue to be and where we're going to continue to focus is on what we can do right, not what he can do wrong.
You don't buy my symmetry that is, if he were to fade, Huckabee rises.
Well, I think that goes without saying. I mean, anytime you take 20% away from somebody and distribute it among other candidates, I think we're obviously going to pick up points. But again, we're not looking for his demise, but more for our increase and for us to boost from our own movement and from doing our own right things.
All right. Two fascinating things that, politically about Mike Huckabee this week. He's always hard to always understand or figure. But this week in which he's burst through the bubble and made some news, I don't know if it was this week, but in the last few days, he spoke to an African-American church
Yes, sir.
in South Carolina
This past weekend.
to an audience typically Democratic voters. Then I think, didn't he go to the AFL-CIO convention?
Yes, sir. He
It's
was
the
there
only
yesterday.
Republican to do that, to union voters. No other Republican is doing that kind of thing. Does he, and I understand he thinks he's different. He's got a different kind of message. I understand that. But as his campaign manager, do you think there are a significant number of African American voters in South Carolina who are going to abandon, say, Hillary, cross over from the Democratic primary to vote for your dad? And do you think the same of union households? Were those, while being admirable and interesting, are they really potentially worthwhile places for him to go.
Absolutely. I mean, one, you're not just running to be president of the Republican Party, but you're running to be president of the United States, and you can't be afraid to walk into a room of people that may not support you, may not agree with you on everything, because at the end of the day, you need to be able to govern all of those people. And so the idea that you would be afraid or hesitant to step into a place where everybody's not chanting and celebrating your name, to me is a recipe for disaster, and it's a campaign you're probably not going to win in the long run. And you mentioned significant margins, even if, a lot of elections are decided by 1, 2, 3 points. So it may not be that you peel off significant margins of African American vote or the union vote, but if you get any segment of that, then I think that you're adding to. And again, he doesn't want to just be the president of the Republican Party, but he wants to connect with voters from all spectrums and from whatever group. And I think we've allowed Democrats for far too long to put people in boxes and say that because you're, in a union or because you're an African American, you have to vote Democrat. And we want to peel those people away and invest in them and show them that being a Republican is actually a pretty good thing.
So the calculus is we got 16 candidates. South Carolina's a place where he's run well. Lindsey Graham is in the race. It may be nip and tuck with 4 or 5 folks finding their niches. He may be one of them. And if he can get a few votes out of those churches or out of union households, all the better.
Right.
You're just looking for whatever you can get, whatever you can piece together.
Right. And I think he has a real connection with a lot of those people. I mean, you look at what makes up the unions, and these are hardworking people that identify with him, and he identifies a lot of the upbringing that a lot of the people that are part of that community, I think they relate very much to each other, and so it's a very natural constituency for him in a way that you wouldn't expect.
One thing you did mention, he's opposed to a lot of the trade agreements that most Republicans like, and he, according to some exit polling, he once got nearly 50% of the African American vote in Arkansas in a race for governor.
Yes, sir.
So I'm helping you out there. You appreciate that? See, I'm not so bad. Now tell me, how does this race possibly turn out? 16 people. Let me ask it this way. I don't know if you read my articles, but I have
sometimes.
I have this theme that he's not really running for president. that he's a brand. He's a popular brand, and he's polishing this brand and strengthening this brand with the evangelical community and as a media person, that he really can't get there in terms of the money and the way the race is shaping up. I know you're going to tell me that's baloney. Why would you run for president and go through all this not to win? Tell me how he wins. Take me as his campaign manager. Give me the scenario. Start in Iowa and take it on out. How does it happen?
Well, I mean, I think one of the biggest things is that Americans are looking for somebody they can believe in again. They're looking for somebody that gives them hope, somebody that can bring them together. And I think you just gave a very great illustration in the question before that. He's not afraid to go into groups like the unions and African Americans and bring those groups together, and people are looking for that.
That's not my question. Where does he get the votes? What does he do in Iowa? What does he do in New Hampshire? What does he do in South Carolina? What does he do in the southern primaries?
We've won Iowa before. We know how it operates. Iowa is not a state that responds to who's a big deal at the time, whether Trump is first right now or Bush is first. They don't let the polls dictate who they support in a caucus. And a caucus is very different than any other type of election process I've been a part of. And I've worked in both 2008 and 2012 presidential campaigns, specifically in Iowa. And it's just a completely different makeup. And we know how that operates. It's a very retail politics driven state. And as you know, there are very few people, particularly in this group of 16, that are as good at retail politics as he is.
Well, he won Iowa.
Exactly. He won Iowa. And I expect us to do that again. And from there, we move on to states like South Carolina, and then you've got a slew of states across the South and the Midwest, which I expect us to do extremely well in those.
How much does the field winnow after Iowa? You just said you think you can win it again, or will win it again, but certainly he's not going to do so poorly that he's out of the race. How quickly does this 16 get manageable, do you think?
I think a lot of it really depends. One of the things before we even get to Iowa that I think may winnow the field some is taking place next week, and that's the first debate. And you're going to see 10 candidates instead of 17, actually. We should start talking about 17 candidates. I
Who-
don't know.
who'd
if
I
you saw
miss?
Governor Gilmore from Virginia just got into the race, I believe, yesterday.
How could I
And
have
so
missed that? Yeah,
I,
okay. All
I
right.
mean,
Okay.
with a keen eye that you have, I don't know how that slipped past you, but you know, you've got 17 candidates in the race and 10 on a debate stage. I mean, so I think that that'll be kind of one of the first tests and one of the first things that starts to winnow the field down a little bit. And from there, I think we're in a really good position to move on beyond Iowa. We know what we did wrong last time, and that helps us a lot. One of the things that we kind of joke about is we've run before, and so that's an advantage, but we also have a disadvantage in having run before. And so there's a plus and a minus there, and knowing how to balance that out, I think, is a little bit of a challenge, but something that we understand and we're ready to take on. And I see a very good and clear path for us.
And John Brummett now joins me for a review of the interview with Sarah Huckabee Sanders there. About what you expected. Huckabee doubles down on this oven comment. Are you surprised?
Well, what else can you do? He said it, and you can't take it back. And it's, as she essentially acknowledged, that kind of attention is not necessarily bad right now in this field against the Trump phenomenon. And this idea that he is especially dedicated to the plight of Israel doesn't hurt him with conservatives. So yeah, I mean, I don't think he's going to say it again, but I think you may as well double and triple down once it's said.
Yeah, you mentioned Trump, and that was obviously a big discussion in y'all's conversation there. Do you think Trump has changed the dynamic of this race? You got a little bit of an evasive answer from her on that, but I mean, has Donald Trump made it to where these candidates have to ratchet up the rhetoric?
They do, particularly if they're trying to get in this debate. Huckabee's probably in the top 10, but yeah, but I truly believe, and she didn't want to admit it, I think Trump is taking Huckabee's market. I really do. I think the sort of the media guy, the bit of celebrity who's the outsider, who says pretty out there things and appeals to disaffected anti-Washington, anti-establishment people, I think that's what Huckabee was going for.
We've had out of the box rhetoric before, though. Presidential campaigns are not, this isn't a first.
No, but Trump is getting a lot of currency right now for that very thing, and a primary that's otherwise weak. The point I'm trying to make, I think our guy Huckabee could actually be a more serious contender right now if Trump were not there.
Yeah.
I think he could be.
All right, we got plenty to work on from this going on. John Brummett, thank you very much. I appreciate
My
you.
great
Great job.
pleasure. Always.
All right.